Hey, can we just wait? She's just coming down the road, Rob.
Who is?
Alana.
You don't start right on that time, do we? Whatever. You good to go, Lou? Yeah, I'm good. So we've got zeros. Yeah. When we go away. One sec. Okay. Good afternoon. I call on the Guard Commander of the Catafalque Party to have the Catafalque Party take its positions around the memorial. My name is Rob Crossing. My father, Warwick Crossing, and his brother Dick fought in the second. After my father died, Archie Campbell, who was also of the second, was closely involved in the raising of my family through legacy. I'm now on the committee of the second Commando Association, and I'm honoured to be our MC again today. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. I've been asked to pass on some apologies from people who are not able to be with us today. The Honourable Scott Morrison MP, Prime Minister of Australia, gives his apology. He and the federal government are represented here today by Mr Vince Connolly MP. I welcome Mr Connolly. Senator the Honourable Linda Reynolds CSC, Minister for Defence, gives her apology. She and the Department of Defence are also represented here today by Mr Connolly. The Honourable Anthony Albanese MP, Leader of the Opposition federally, gives his apology. Mr Patrick Gorman MP is with us, representing Mr Albanese here today, and I welcome Mr Gorman. The Honourable Mark McGowan MLA, Premier of WA, gives his apology. He and the state government were to be represented here today by the Honourable Peter Tinley MLA. Unfortunately, Mr Tinley is unwell and also gives his apologies. The Honourable Lisa Harvey MLA, Leader of the Opposition in WA, has sent her apology. Representing Ms Harvey here today is the Honourable Jorn Sibma MLC, Shadow Minister for Ports, Government Accountability and Procurement, Public Sector Integrity and Performance and Veterans Issues. But before they could withdraw, the Japanese put in place an invasion plan that began with the bombing of Darwin on the morning of 19th of February 1942. The bombing was specifically designed to knock out Allied and naval power based in and around Darwin so that their forces could be used to counter-attack, a fact not recorded in most histories of these events. That same evening, the Japanese landed about 6,000 troops on East and West Timor. Unlike most of Australia's forces that were captured by the Japanese, the second men were lucky to escape the initial invasion because they were not following their orders to the letter. Instead of being based at the airfield in Dili, all but 20 men had been moved to the mountains so that they could recover from or avoid malaria. The men had been so badly equipped that after a short time in Dili, 9 out of 10 came down with malaria. Of the 20 men left to guard the airfield, 17 escaped the Japanese clutches, largely due to the skill and bravery of Private Joe Poynton, who was later awarded a DCM. During their 2 months on Timor to that point, the second men had established very good relations with the local villagers, largely because they treated them with respect. These relations proved decisive when they came to rely on the villagers to protect them from the Japanese and to help them in taking offensive action. When the men answered with numerous deadly ambushes, the Japanese declared them outlaws and warned that if they did not surrender, they would not be given POW privileges and if captured would be executed. As the second men hit the Japanese with relentless raids, they appeared and operated like bushrangers of Australia's wild colonial past. Many of the men grew long beards, razors were unobtainable, and resembled the members of the Kelly Gang. To survive and fight a campaign of David and Goliath proportions required ingenuity, imagination, and mateship on a mammoth scale. Ingenuity, like rebuilding a radio from spare parts so that the force could contact Australia and tell the army chiefs that they were indeed still fighting. Imagination, like mobilising hundreds of people to move supplies out of the enemy's reach without having the means to communicate with or compensate the willing workers. It demanded mateship not just among the Australians but with the local population. The skill and fitness of the second men would have counted for nothing had they not won the hearts of the hardy mountain people of Portuguese Timor. After entering the neutral territory uninvited and then drawing the Japanese there, the Australians pulled off a remarkable feat in bush diplomacy and mass mobilisation, despite having little prior knowledge of the local people or their language. Many young Timorese and Portuguese volunteered to serve alongside the Australians. They became the eyes and ears of the soldiers, and by hauling supplies and equipment as well, they made the second company a vastly more mobile and effective guerrilla force. Some actually carried arms and took part in engagements with the enemy. Many more Timorese villagers gave the Australians food and shelter and whatever else they needed, and they refused to inform on them. The result was a ragtag army of professionals and volunteers that is unrivalled in Australian military history. The skill and calibre of the individuals in the second and the support of the Timorese explain how this small force was able to kill hundreds of enemy soldiers in dozens of close-quarter actions over a period of 10 months and suffer an incredibly small number of casualties, just 10 men in combat. Overwhelmingly, the support of the Timorese population who protected this force contributed to this extraordinary outcome. Timor was by no means the main game when it came to turning back the Japanese tide in New Guinea and the Pacific, but it was no mere sideshow either. The 400 Australians in Portuguese Timor, later augmented to 700 with reinforcements from the 2nd Force, succeeded in tying up several thousand enemy troops in mid-1942 at a time when the Japanese army was fighting its way down the Keynote track and came within striking distance of Australia. The Japanese troops in Timor, which rose to 9 battalions of more than 9,000 men by the end of 1942, could have made a real difference had they been deployed in the Keynote campaign or elsewhere. Despite the many extraordinary facets to this epic in guerrilla warfare, it appears as a minor footnote in most histories of the Second World War, overshadowed by the New Guinea and Pacific campaigns. Indeed, Australia's official history of the Second World War includes most of the Timor campaign as an appendix. Few people today are even aware that Australian forces fought in Portuguese Timor, or that as many as 40 to 60,000 Timorese died as a result of this conflict, far exceeding the losses of any other nation that supported Australia's in war. That brings us to today. Today we are fortunate to have the daughter of second member Lieutenant John Burridge, the very talented Terry Burridge, to lead us in singing the national anthem. Please stand.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is girt by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains and let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Thank you, Terry. Please be seated. In a few moments, we will lay wreaths to pay tribute to the men of the second, and I'd like to give you some information about the sequence of events. In a moment, our piper, Corporal Damien Stillwell, will begin piping a lament. While the lament is being played, the first wreath will be laid on behalf of the second Commando Association by Amanda and Warwick Broad, the parents of Jackson Broad, one of the cadets in our catafalque party. After that, other wreaths will be laid in a sequence that has been communicated to those who have told us that they will lay a wreath. If you haven't yet been in touch with us and you'd like to lay a wreath, please feel free to do so, but please touch base with Colleen, who's now putting her arm in the air, before you do so. Thank you. Our thanks to all of those who have laid wreaths today. You've heard of the terrible price paid by the East Timorese for the invaluable support that they gave to our soldiers in World War II. You probably also know something about what we call the debt of honour, which is recognition of the value of the help given by the East Timorese to the 2nd soldiers. Many of the 2nd soldiers put in a lot of effort over the years in trying to repay the debt of honour, as have many of their families. One such family member is Colleen Thornton Ward. Colleen, the daughter of 2nd soldier Corporal Norm Thornton, is the treasurer of our association. Colleen has kindly agreed to deliver the address today. Please welcome Colleen.
Thank you. A 77-year friendship, my family's journey. My journey with East Timor, Portuguese Timor, Timor-Leste, began as many of yours did, with a father, a grandfather or relative having served there in 1942 as a 2nd Commando and owing his life to the assistance given to him by the Timorese. My father was Norman Douglas Thornton and my godfather was Geordie Hamilton Smith, Dad's good mate in 4 section of the Commandos. Dad never spoke much about his time in Portuguese Timor, but our family did know that he owed his life to a young Timorese man by the name of Nicolau Goncalves. Geordie, on the other hand, used to tell us that the Japanese sword Dad kept in the top of the linen cupboard was going to be used by a Japanese soldier to kill Dad, but Geordie saved him. The sword is still in the family and held by my brother Ross. In 1968, our family was fortunate to meet Nicolau Goncalves, our father's guardian angel, when, with the assistance of the 2nd Commandos and the Portuguese government, Nicolau was able to come to Australia and stay with our family in Denmark. I was fortunate to have travelled to Denmark with Nicolau and Ray Aiken. In the early 1980s, I went to work in Leederville and would often visit Cole Doig, who lived close by. Cole was one of the original 2nd Commandos, and he is the author of the books A Great Fraternity, The Story of the 2nd Commando Association, 1946-1992, The Ramblings of a Rat Bag, and A History of the 2nd Independent Company and 2nd Commando Squadron. My friendship with Cole kept me closely connected with the association. In the early 1990s, I joined the activist group Friends of East Timor. A memorable and courageous exile was George Adidronjo, an Indonesian journalist. George was the first journalist to enter East Timor after the Indonesian occupation. He was a vocal supporter of the East Timorese and a vocal opponent of Suharto, which is why he was exiled. On November the 12th, 1994, the 3rd anniversary of the Santa Cruz massacres, marches were held in all the Australian capital cities, opposing the occupation of East Timor by the Indonesians. In Perth, we had 800 people marching, chanting, "Indonesia out of East Timor, freedom now." In 1995, my brother Murray made plans to go to East Timor from Darwin, where he was holidaying with his family, and I decided to accompany him. With a crash course in Indonesian and Tetum and instructions from Cole Doig, Ray Aiken, Bob Smythe, John Burridge and Jack Carey, and a large box of equipment for the Don Bosco Centre, we arrived in Dili from Kupang on the 11th of June 1995. Thank you. Paddy Keneally and Ray Aiken had given us written instructions of places to visit. Murray and I had to take family photos with us to prove that we were in fact brother and sister and not Western journalists. Sadly, Nicolau Goncalves, our father's guardian angel, and 2 of his sons had been killed in Bazatati in 1975 when the Indonesians invaded. We were met by Father Walter van Wawi, a Belgian Salesian who was in charge of the Don Bosco Centre. Father Walter was an amazing man who had been present when Saigon fell to the Viet Cong and witnessed the reenactment of the armoured tank rolling through the lock gates into the palace for the world media. He had escaped Vietnam with only his fingernail clippers, and we felt honoured to have a man with his depth of strength and experience assisting us in East Timor. Father Walter's help was invaluable to us in arranging to meet with Nicolau's family on several occasions. Nicolau's wife Florentina had gone blind, and Father Walter made arrangements to get her to a doctor. He also helped us at the Indonesian bank, changing travellers' checks so we could give money to Nicolao's family. We stayed at the Turismo Hotel in Dili, and this was where the Indonesian intel was also based, so we were in good hands. We'd promised Ray Aitken we would go to Beza Tati and find Luis Gonzaga, a carpenter who helped 4 Section during the war. On arrival in Beza Tati, we asked for Luis, and as we were the centre of attention, it was not hard to find assistance. The police indicated I should hop onto the back of a motorbike, and they would take me to his hut, and off we went. Meeting Luis was incredibly emotional, with a lot of hugging and photos being taken and shown. He remembered the men of 4 Section and of Nicolao. We had planned to go to Anaro, where the 2nd Second had a hospital during the war. The Indonesian military kept a close eye on us. The bus to Alu, a 22-seater with 34 people and livestock on board, was stopped, and the Timorese had to show their IDs, and Maria and I our passports. In Morbisi, we stayed the night, albeit not as welcome visitors. We again had to produce our passports, and that night, in the little shed we were allowed to stay in, we had an Indonesian running around the building. Murray assured me we were safe as he had his Swiss Army knife. The locals had 2-foot machetes and the Indonesians M16 guns. From Morbisi to Anaro, we rode on the back of a truck with the locals. On the back of a truck you see everything, you feel everything, and when you're in a cloud, you get wet. Once the Indonesian military saw us, they joined us, and our chatting with the locals stopped, but the 3 Indonesian soldiers were friendly enough and told us they were on a tour of duty. It took us 2 hours to travel 50 kilometres. On arrival in Anaro, we again had to present ourselves to the military with our passports and explain why we were there. As we came in, we stayed one day in Anaro and caught a bus back to Dili. As we came down into Dili, one of the brake drums blew due to constant braking on a winding mountain road, and the bus had to stop. After the smoke settled, the driver said it was okay to get back on the bus. Murray and I did, but none of the locals with their chooks took up the offer. Walking around Dili, you could feel the apprehension with people wanting to talk to us but being afraid. Words can never describe being in an occupied country. On leaving Dili, we vowed we would return, and we would soon get that opportunity. Early in 1999, Indonesia's President Habibie agreed to a referendum to be held in East Timor in August. Voluntary, self-funded international observers were being recruited by the Australia East Timor International Volunteers Project. Without hesitating, Murray and I applied and were accepted. We wanted to repay, in some small way, the debt we owed to the Timorese. Had it not been for them, many of us would not be here today. To quote a commando, they were our guardian angels who helped us find food and bathed our wounds. During our time in East Timor, we were to experience many traumatic and dangerous events. This year, I opened the diary I wrote 20 years ago and will recall some of those events. Sunday the 15th of August 1999, I left Perth for Bali, where I would meet Murray, and then from there we would go to Dili. The Commando Association had given us boxes of equipment for the Don Bosco Training Centre. We arrived in Dili on the 16th of August and spent time walking around. We woke on the 17th of August, Indonesia's Independence Day, to gunfire, as the CNRT building just down the road was being attacked. That day, we watched as Enrico Gutierrez, leader of the pro-Indonesia Atarat group, circled Dili 5 times with his armed militia. It was an aggressive show of strength. After registering with the United Nations mission in East Timor in Dili as voluntary observers, Murray and I, along with Les Bayok, decided to travel to Swai to be observers. To do this, we had to travel into West Timor, Indonesia, along the border and then back into East Timor. Thursday the 19th of August, at 6 a.m. we caught a bus from Dili for West Timor, passing many houses with the Indonesian flag fluttering out the front. The 20-seat bus had double that many passengers and livestock on the top. The trip was not without its dangers, and as we travelled along the steep winding coast road, we noticed a truck that had gone over the edge and lay at the bottom of the drop. In Atambua, the bus circled the city, picking up passengers for 2 hours, and we stayed on the bus for safety. We had to produce our passports and documentation on several occasions at checkpoints along the route. It took us 10 hours to travel 250 kilometres, arriving in Swai at 4:30. Later that evening, Murray and I walked around Swai to get an idea of the town. We met the local TNI liaison officer, who spoke excellent English and had spent time in Darwin and in Queensland. A young Timorese woman who advised us to stay at the Wisma Covalima, and it was there that we met Katharina Williams Van Klinken, an amazing young woman who was working up in the mountains at Zumalai for the United Nations, registering people for the vote. Also living at Wisma Covalima was Samaya da Silva Barreto and Alipi Baltazar, who were two young Timorese acting as interpreters for the United Nations. Samaya and Alipio provided invaluable assistance to us. Friday the 20th of August, we went and registered with the police and also the UNAMET staff, who told us, if shit happens, you're on your own. Murray assured me he had a planned route for us to walk out of Swai, albeit into Indonesia, if there was trouble. We had to keep our shoes on or within reach, as you cannot run without them, and also never have a solid wall behind you, because when there is trouble, you need to run. And of course, he had his Swiss Army knife. In Swai, we were to encounter two militia groups, the Laksau and the Mahidi, who were both well equipped with M16s, handmade guns and machetes. One member of the militias was wandering around Swai with grenades, threatening to throw them into crowds. The militia groups would organise autonomy rallies, trucking the locals in and forcing them to listen to pro-autonomy speeches, and at times you could cut the tension with a knife. In April, 400 people had been killed around Swai, and in the church grounds just down the road from Wisma Covalima, there were 2,500 internally displaced people who'd been there since April. Father Hilario, Father Soares, Father Duanto and the nuns were trying to care for these people. We would often go down and visit the IDPs. Sunday the 22nd of August, we attended Mass in the small church beside the partially completed cathedral. The church was packed and many people stood in the grounds outside the church as Fathers Hilario, Duanto and Soares celebrated the Mass. After Mass, we met with Father Hilario, who was very concerned about the 2,500 internally displaced people living in the grounds, as water and food had been cut off since the 19th of August, and the situation was getting desperate in Swai. Tuesday the 24th of August, Murray and I had managed to hire a microlet to take us out into the districts. As we came to an intersection, the microlet slowed down and a militia member went to climb aboard. Murray and I quickly jumped up and shook his hand. Thankfully, this took him by surprise and he stepped back off the microlet. The microlet driver quickly did a U-turn and we sped off down the road, with the driver signalling to us how close we were to danger by dragging his finger across his throat. Thursday the 26th of August, the warungs are closing down as there's no food and the Indonesians are pulling out of Swai en masse. Friday the 27th of August, thousands of CNRT members were finally allowed to rally in Swai. When they returned 8 hours later, the members had multiplied to roughly 3,000. It was an incredibly joyous event, which very nearly became a disaster and would have done had it not been for the BREE mob, the Special Operations Paramilitary and Tactical Unit of the Indonesian National Police, stopping the militia as they were coming down the road with their weapons. Saturday the 28th of August, I phoned headquarters in Dili and spoke to Alana McTiernan, who was in the same group as Murray and myself. The news is not good. 10 people have been killed in Dili on Thursday and 4 on Friday. Was told there was probably plans to evacuate the Australians, as the militia wanted to kill them. This was not very helpful to us, as we were on the other side of the island in Swai. Sunday the 29th of August, Bishop Bello conducted the church service as the militia made a token gesture of handing in their weapons. Monday the 30th of August 1999 was a historic and to us an extremely unforgettable day, as thousands swarmed the polling stations hours before they opened to vote. They would not be deterred by the militia members moving amongst them. Witnessing these proud people who were prepared to put their life on the line for their freedom was witnessing the human spirit at its finest. To see an elderly Timorese gentleman come out from the polling station proudly holding up his inked finger was something that will stay with me forever. Murray and I escaped from Swai on the last plane to leave for Dili. On one occasion in Dili, our group of volunteers were all staying in a house together. It was evening and everyone was relaxing when the power went off and there was movement outside. When the lights came back on, Murray and I had our shoes on. We had no way out of Dili or East Timor, in fact, as all transport out of Dili was cancelled. We heard of a flight being chartered by BBC journalists, and this was how we were to leave East Timor. As we sat in the Dili airport waiting for the flight, local Timorese in the airport, hoping to catch a flight, were being taken out of the airport by the militia. Finally, we boarded the plane, and as it took off, we could see Dili burning below us. One of the journalists stood up and said, "This is a flight of shame." Murray returned to East Timor in September 1999 after Interfet landed and worked for the NGO Timor Aid. He employed Gennaro Goncalves, the son of Nicolau Goncalves, our father's criado. From a bond formed in war between Dad and Nicolau, their sons were now working together to help rebuild East Timor. Alana and I returned to East Timor in April 2000 to visit Murray and experience firsthand the devastation caused by the militia. On reaching Batano on the south coast, the beach was littered with clothing of women and children who had been forcibly taken from East Timor to Indonesia, as the men and the boys had gone into hiding in the forest. With us was Paddy Keneally. Since 1995, Murray and I have returned to Timor-Leste many times, and each time visiting Nicolau's family. This year was very special as we returned to Swai to celebrate 20 years of East Timor, Timor-Leste independence. We had not seen Samaya da Silva Barreto for 20 years, and to meet him again was incredibly emotional. The highlight of our trip was attending Mass in the newly completed Ave Maria Cathedral with Simeo de Barreto and his family. The cathedral had been a shell when we were there in 1999, and it was where fathers Hilario, Duwanto, Soares, and hundreds of refugees were slaughtered on the 6th of September, 2 days after the referendum results were announced. This year, for the 20th anniversary, we were fortunate to meet with the Timorese President Francisco Gutierrez, who shared his story with us about his family's involvement assisting the commandos in Osu during the war, and we presented him with a copy of All the Bull's Men, the unit's history. I want to thank all those people and groups who support our association and those who are on or have been on our committee. I would like to give special thanks to Rob and Louis Crossing, who have provided our association with a digital platform to publicise the little-known story of the Timorese criado and of the incredible help they gave to the Australian commandos during the war. The gift of that help is now a debt that we, as Australians, owe the Timorese. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Members of the Second had many a reunion over the years. Some of these get-togethers were small and informal. Some were large and well-planned with speeches, and many fell somewhere in between. The common threads through all of them, I think, were things like mateship, recollections of a shared hardship, and usually the sharing of a drink. For many, poetry held a special place in the recollections of the second, because the unit had its own poet in the form of one Jim Smales. Smales wrote many a poem about the unit's experiences and published at least one book of his poems. Dr. Erica Smythe AC is the daughter of one of the second stalwarts, Lieutenant Eric Smythe, who served with the unit in Timor, New Guinea and New Britain. Erica Smythe is a highly experienced business leader and company director with some 45 years' experience in the mineral and petroleum industries across a range of roles. Dr. Smythe was named the 2019 Western Australian of the Year in the business category, and I'm delighted that Erica has agreed to read for us today some of the poem Reunion by Jim Smales. Please welcome Dr. Erica Smythe.
Thank you very much. I'm sure many of you have this book. If you haven't, it's worth asking a friend. There's a certain crowd of fellows who foregather once a year, the Second Independent, and they come from far and near, to have a yarn and drink a toast, to clasp the hand again of those who speak the language and sing the old refrain. They take life rather seriously and are apt to pass you by until they see the face you know or shout, "Dicker alive." But then the story is recalled and the years roll back a few and the tales are told of one and all, from captain to the crew. Right from our small beginnings at Foster by the Sea, all through those tropic islands with the second AIC. But ere we speak of more tonight, let's think of those who fell, for they have done their job for now, and surely done it well. There's Eric Mitchell, Paddy Knight, and old Pinocchio, with Smeaton, Chalmers, Kenny, Hogg. That is how they go. The boys of 7 section were friends of mine and you. What better toast to them let's drink, the finest of the few. Thus we could go on and on, the night is going fast. We've had a splendid evening, but it will not be the last. So let us meet again next year with every man attendant to toast the finest unit yet, the Second Independent.
Thank you, Erica. Before we read the names of the fallen, and by way of introduction to that, the Friends of Timor Containers provides wonderful support to the peoples of Timor-Leste in the form of containers of useful items, much of it new and all of it donated. The contents of one of the containers that they recently sent was said to include, deep breath, 2 hospital beds, an ambulance stretcher, 50 walkers and walking frames, bundles of crutches, 10 workstations, lots of school desks and chairs, filing cabinets and storage cupboards, several pallets of new school uniforms and sports shirts, many bags of linen and sewing fabrics, cricket gear, 15 bicycles, basketball goalposts and 2 electronic smartboard systems complete with monitors, projectors, cabling, etc. You get the idea. The treasures that Friends of Timor Containers send to Timor-Leste are very well received. As a result of his work with Friends of Timor Containers, John Cram joined our association and is now a valued member of our committee. John has kindly agreed to read the names of the fallen for us. Please welcome John.
The fallen. These men of the second died during active service in Timor, New Guinea, and New Britain. Don Airy, Frank Alford, Ron Alexander, Jeff Barclay, Roy Beardman, Huey Brown, Lindsay Brown, Bob Chalmers, Bill Cheeverton, Gordon Chiswell, Harry Cole, Harry Cotsworth, Dick Crowder, Owen Davies, Cyril Doyle, Bob Ewan, Bruce Gannon, Ken Hogg, Bill Holly, Phil Hopper, Peter Kemp, Paddy Knight, Tony Lane, Des Lilia, Stan Ludlow, Jack Maley, Laurie Maloney, Harvey Marriott, Eric Mitchell, Percy Mitchell, Les Moule, Gordon Mulqueeny, Reg Murray, Val Nagel, Jack Northey, Jim Pollard, Don Ramshaw, Keith Richards, Jack Simpson, Andy Smeaton, Fred Smith, Charlie Stanton, Alec Stewart, Bob Swift, George Thomas, Lindsay Thomas, John Walker, Dick Waller, Wally Wordy, Arthur Yates. We honour the memory of these men. We also pay tribute to those members of the Second who have passed away since the war.
Thank you, John. Our association's president, John Denman, is the son of Second veteran, the late Lieutenant Jack Denman, MC. John has been an active committee member for many years and our president for 2. In 2019, John went on the tour of Timor-Leste organised by Ed Willis through Timor Adventures. That tour, which was, from all reports...
Thank you, Rob. Distinguished and invited guests, association members and friends, and a special welcome to Jack Hansen up in Hervey Bay. So welcome to the 7th commemoration ceremony. Time has not dimmed the importance of this annual occasion of recognition and remembrance of the Second men and the East Timorese. This year marks 77 years since the fighting between the 2nd Commando Squadron, Australia's first commandos, and the Japanese forces in East Timor in 1942. In that conflict, a few hundred Australian troops, all specially trained volunteers, occupied the attention of the 9,000 Japanese troops for almost a year. At a time when the Japanese could have otherwise deployed on the Keynote track or elsewhere. The last man standing, John, or known as Jack Trelise Hansen, WX 12804, turned 98 on the 9th of August this year. Jack is watching this live stream from his unit in Hervey Bay, Queensland. I understand that he's doing well and has many visitors from the different commando associations and other military organisations. Although still sharp of mind, but not as nimble as he was when fighting his way through dense jungle, scrambling uphill and down dale with Japanese on his trail. Nowadays, he enjoys a far more relaxed time with a Zimmer frame to chase the nurses and robots deliver his meals. All the best, Jack. The Keith Hayes Building. The Timor 1942 campaign tour group, together with Naomi Robson, Hilton Hayes, and Trevor Hayes, who is in the crowd there somewhere, attended the inauguration of in Dili on the 24th of April this year of the building. The school was most appreciative of the donation made by the association to fund the construction of a 1 classroom build in a 3 classroom complex. And they offered to name the whole building, not just the classroom, as the Keith Hayes Building. Perth Anzac Day. Peter Epps and Colleen Thornton Ward laid the unit's wreaths at the dawn services in Perth and at Campbell Barracks, of the Emma District and the Bazay Tete. This project is now known as the Commando Campaign Site Survey Project, completing the remaining site works. Men of the Second. This is an ongoing and important project to honour the memory of the Second men. Peter Epps has worked tirelessly to create a database of the men. However, specific details are not known for between 60 to 70% of the men. And the details also includes the medals that they're entitled to. Members and friends are encouraged to view the database, and the database is on the website. It's under history, and then there's a tab for men of the second. And they're encouraged to upload photos or stories of their relative to that site. They may also like to review the database. They might like to search them. If they haven't been, if they're not available, they can actually obtain them from the archive site, and that site it's actually detailed in the October 2019 Courier. It gives you the link for where you actually order the records from. I've also got from Peter Epps, give me some list of the actual information if anyone wants it. The current cost for the service is $38, and if anyone does actually obtain a record, let Peter know, because Peter will then update the database with those details. Finally, I would like to thank Rob and Louis for the organising this ceremony. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'm delighted to again hand the microphone to Terry Burridge. Terry will sing for us Roses of Picardy. Please welcome Terry.
Thanks, Rob. I'm going to sing one of the most famous songs of the First World War, Roses of Picardy. It's said that following the war, the singing of this song helped soldiers who were suffering from shell shock to regain their powers of speech. She is watching by the poplars, coronet with the sea blue eyes. She is watching and longing and waiting while the long white roadway lies, and a song stirs in the silence in the wind of the bow above. She listens and starts and trembles. 'Tis the first little song of love. Roses are shining in Picardy, but there's never a rose like you. And the roses will die with the summertime, and our roads may be far apart, but there's one rose that dies not in Picardy. 'Tis the rose that I keep in my heart. Roses are shining in Picardy, in the hush of the silver dew. Roses are flowering in Picardy, but there's never a rose like you. And the roses will die with the summertime, and our roads may be far apart, but there's one rose that dies not in Picardy. 'Tis the rose that I keep in my heart.
Thank you, Terry. In a moment, I will ask a committee member and Terry's brother, Mr. John Burridge MG, who won his medal for gallantry in Vietnam, to recite the ode. After that, the bugler will play the last post, the catafalque party will present arms, and that will be followed by a minute's silence. The silence will be broken by another bugle call, the rouse. Please stand and welcome John.
I think my voice recovered, Terry. They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Please be seated. Thank you, John. That almost concludes this afternoon's ceremony. Please join me in thanking our piper, Corporal Damien Stillwell, and our bugler, Captain David Cusworth. After today's ceremony, 3 things. First, please remember to sign the attendance book if you haven't already done that. Second, if there is any relative of the second veteran Ray Parry here, anybody who knows how to contact any of them, could you please come and see me or Peter Epps after the ceremony? Thirdly, please join us for a drink and a bite to eat at the Captain Sterling Hotel. In a moment,